Welcome back, guys, to another rapid response video, and today's comment is from Nathan, where he says, I have two questions for you. 1. Is there a specific reason you prefer DC over Marvel? Is it just that that's the franchise you got exposed to and hooked on first, or is there a fundamental difference between the two that makes you prefer DC? And number 2, what's one thing from Marvel Comics that you wish could be taken and permanently integrated into DC? This could be a character, a location like Wakanda, an item like the Infinity Stones, or a force of nature like the Phoenix Force. Two very good questions, and I'm obviously going to break them down 1 and 2. So starting with the first one, is there a reason I prefer DC over Marvel? Now, the fundamental differences I actually think could be a really interesting video to make, considering there are many differences between these two comic book worlds. Now, I do get the base of this question asked to me quite often in terms of how you've asked it. If you asked this question maybe 5 years ago, I think my response would be something to the effect of Marvel heroes, you can almost roughly see eye to eye with them. You can understand them and you frankly know who they are. With DC heroes and characters in general, you look up to them. In my opinion, they do tend to be a lot more powerful, and I do think just how they carry themselves, their personalities and attitudes, their personas are just far more outer worldly than Marvel characters can be. That is kind of a rough basis to look at it because these are comic book worlds at the end of the day. They do some of the craziest stuff story-wise and character-wise. So what I just said about DC characters could be said the same way for Marvel. Although growing up a fan of these worlds, I did start as a Marvel fan before DC because realistically, whose favorite superhero as a kid is not Spider-Man? I feel like Spider-Man is the most basic, but the best place to start off with when trying to get into comic books and superheroes. Spider-Man gives you everything you want as a child, and even pretty much everything you want as a teenager as well, because the character can really speak to you from that point of view. However, it was Batman Begins that changed everything for me, and when that movie came out, I was about 9 years old, almost 10. I got so hooked to the Batman character, I don't think I read Marvel comic books anymore. There was only one line of Marvel I kept up with, and when they canceled it, I stopped reading Marvel as a whole. What changed things for me with Batman Begins is this whole argument of Batman's a human. You can connect to that character, in which the rebuttal is, how do you connect with someone like Batman? This is a little kid who lost both of his parents. He traveled the world to become the most highly trained warrior in human history, who then comes back a billionaire and dresses up as a bat to fight crime. Of course, I cannot relate to that stuff, but when you put him in movie, you do have to make the character relatable in a lot of ways. And for example, when you look at Batman in film, and I'm going to be heavily taking this from Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, the money he has is just there. It's not necessarily a focus. The fact that he dresses up as a bat is just there. It truly is not the focus. The focus is the man. It's the man who's gone through hardships. It's the man who's had a tough upbringing. It's the man who doesn't truly know what he wants to do with his life. It's the man who continuously questions himself and doubts himself. That's why I find Batman to be very interesting, because that is how you can connect with the character. It's not about all the other superficial things that makes Bruce Batman. It's about what makes Bruce. And there's so many of us around the world today who have experienced certain things he has, or have certain mentalities and hardships that he has gone through. When that movie came out, it opened the door to the wider DC universe. That is when I got invested into a lot of the comic books, the movies, and soon to be video games. And maybe you could view this as a fundamental difference between DC and Marvel, but one of the biggest things I take away from DC, I view it much more as a mythos, and I'm not trying to necessarily glorify unify comic books or DC into some type of religion. But in all honesty, I do see DC as a Greek mythology or a Norse Viking mythology. That might be weird to kind of hear it being put that way, but it is how I see it because a lot of those characters are larger than life. To see how they've modeled Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman over the years, to see some of the brilliant artwork some of these artists have created over 80 years of history, spanning multiple different generations, going from the 30s to the 2020s. Seeing an artist like Alex Ross craft some of the most beautiful paintings in the world, to the point where Superman never truly had a face in the way that if you looked at Superman, you knew that was Superman. And until Alex Ross made his Superman portrait, that is when we knew that is roughly what Superman could look like. Even Mike Hill, a renowned British sculptor and model maker who mainly makes models off of celebrities, worked alongside Alex Ross and made a sculpt of what Superman would look like. And he's even on record to say that what they created was not a Christopher Reeve or a George Reeves recognizable actor. It is Superman. Alex Ross is so detailed in his art, he created what Superman could actually look like if he was a real person. Whereas the comic books divulge into the sci-fi, fantasy, far left field storytelling of multiverses, omnipotent beings, new gods and old gods, what the films are capable of doing is going even deeper than all of that artificial stuff and being able to craft these stories that are not just right versus wrong, good versus bad. It's not so black and white with DC. That is why I have personally gravitated so heavily to the Nolan trilogy of Batman. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Zack Snyder's Justice League. That is why I don't view Superman as the Boy Scout who solves all problems with no consequences, because all actions have consequences, and even in the actions that would be declared to be good will still have an outcome. And the true Superman to me is how he handles those outcomes. It's how he faces the defiance from society or from higher powered people and beings. It's being allowed to have good days and bad days, good moments and bad moments, but being able to make the decisions that will be the best outcome, not just for yourself, not just for the people you love, but for the people you're trying to protect. And that does not just go for Superman, that goes for Batman, Wonder Woman, and any other character in the DC world. That is why I love those movies so much. And whereas I think ever since DC films have been quite bad, they've completely lost the plot, my love for those movies and my love for what I've read getting into the DC world is what attracts me so much more to DC than Marvel. Now, after that long spiel, for number 2, what is the one thing from Marvel Comics that I would permanently integrate into DC? And you had some really great options there in your comment, and I do have my answer. It's an answer I've had for quite a long time. It's even a what if storyline I've been working on loosely over the past couple of years, and that is what if X-Men was in the DC universe. I feel as if you could just pluck them into DC and it would feel like they have always been there. And maybe it's because of my viewpoints of DC. There's no black and white. There's more to morality than just being absolute good and absolute bad. And I see X-Men as being that group of people. Even the quote-unquote good X-Men don't always remain the quote-unquote good X-Men. Mutants in the Brotherhood are not all bad. It is just a manner of perspective and how they see the world around them. I could only imagine some of the very interesting character dialogues and interactions that some would have with one another. For example, maybe Professor X and Lex Luthor, or Professor X and Martian Manhunter. You can guarantee that most people's wallets would be spending money on the inevitable Batman and Wolverine team-up comic book series. Superman and Magneto, two immigrants who fight for their own different interpretations of how they view justice and truth. Realistically, at the end of the day, so much interest I would have with the X-Men being put in the DC universe that if I kept going, this video would be a lot longer than a rapid response. So there you go, everyone. That is the reason why I enjoy DC over Marvel and the particular Marvel property I would insert into the DC universe. Now, of course, there are definitely more reasons I have for liking DC over Marvel, but I really did try to bring out my fundamental reasons on why I like DC. Because you know what? At the end of the day, we all like these things for our own personal reasons. So Nathan, thank you again. I really appreciate the comment. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.